Okay, so we have the day after. It's now the first day of Rosh Hashanah. After last night, many people were having their Jewish seders for Jewish New Year, digesting the various announcements by the colonial powers, and their plan essentially to divvy up Jerusalem into East and West Jerusalem, to return the status quo of that city to the borders of 1967. Now, everybody I know is in favor of a Palestinian state. We all want a two-state solution. We all want to be done with this problem. But nobody has any grip on the actual details and the problem and the logistics of what these demands end up. Given the fact that the Palestinians have already been offered a state in one form or another at least 5 times. Gaza, for instance, could have been a proper Palestinian state, and it turned into a terrorist base firing missiles at Israel. The West Bank entity, the Palestinian Authority, is run by a mobster who doesn't hold elections and is holding out this. The Fatah position is, okay, we'll refrain from actively engaging in violence while pay for slay, but paying people to do other proxies to do our job for us, so we can claim that we're not terrorists because we've outsourced terrorism to groups like Hamas, right? In the hope that we get the deal of the century. We want half of the baby, as it were, the Solomon dispute, where there were two people who claimed to be the mother of a baby or child. The wisdom of King Solomon, who then said, fine, well, let's cut the child in half. And of course the woman who was the mother said, no, I'd rather not have that. The woman who wasn't not the mother, obviously wanting to divide the child, dismember the child. So the issue today, really, that is revealed in stark detail. Strip away the nationalistic issues, the Palestinian identity issues. You end up with this problem of the prestige of Jerusalem, the dispute that has been ongoing for centuries over that city, over the holy city, the eternal city of the Jews, for centuries, ever since the Roman Empire colonized and conquered Judea. There's still an Arch of Titus in Rome. I'm quite surprised to see that the Italians have not jumped on this bandwagon, for a good reason. I think every Italian knows that the status quo of Rome, for instance, as the Holy Vatican, the Vatican State in Rome, presents all sorts of issues to do with religion. And chopping up a city, whether it's Paris or London, is really a step in the wrong direction. It's back to the days of the Cold War. It's back to the days of East and West Berlin, and it's back to the days of the Jordanian occupation, which has all sorts of resonance in terms of the Jewish religion. Bear in mind that up until 67, Jews were actually forbidden and barred from praying at the Western Wall, the Temple Mount. The Jewish quarter, which had been in East Jerusalem for centuries, had been destroyed by the Jordanians. There are over 50 yeshivas and synagogues that had stood there for centuries that were razed. The Jewish quarter, the Jewish cemetery, was used as paving stones by the Jordanians. The entire West Bank was ethnically cleansed of Jews that had lived there for thousands of years, where there had been a continuous occupation, continuous existence of Jews in that area. And for people to be so casually throwing around libels, blood libels, that the Jews stole the promised land, I find reprehensible. To be watching statements by our President Ramaphosa, essentially, welcoming the recognition of Palestine, a state that does not exist, where the borders have not been determined, and then demanding that the borders that should be recognized are the borders of 1967, and there should be a contiguous state of Palestine alongside Israel. For me, makes no sense, and it's an absurdity given that the Palestinians are waving around the exact same flag as the Jordanians. I've gone a bit into detail in my earlier videos about the provenance of that flag. It was given by the British, a man by the name of Sykes, to imbue a sense of solidarity and Arab unity amongst the Arab nations during World War I. I'm sure everyone is aware of a man by the name of T.E. Lawrence, who was actively campaigning as a British agent, a British spy during World War I, to rabble-rouse the Arabs to overthrow the Ottoman Empire. And all the maps in his diary of T.E. Lawrence, I should take some time. I actually have a copy. That the maps that are presented in that diary paint a very different picture of what the area looked like prior to the British. You essentially had the Kingdom of Jerusalem. There was no Palestine as such. All the maps prior to the British arriving and taking over in 1919, the Arab maps, for instance, also paint a very different picture. There were these. There was a Sanjuk and Valayet, all associated with Damascus, and there were regions of the Ottoman Empire that had been essentially administrative districts that had been sub-districts of that broader empire. And many of the people who refer to themselves as Palestinians are people who come from various parts of the Ottoman Empire. You're welcome to look at what are the supporting evidence and supporting documents that how would one arrive at such a claim? Is it just something that I'm just throwing off the top of my head? Here's the thing: if you just look at the railroad that was created between Damascus and Haifa, and the Ottoman Railroad Company, the history of that company and how it was built during the late stages of the Ottoman Empire and then continued under the British occupation, you realize that it was the region was sparsely populated prior to the arrival of the new industrial transportation systems, and that the railroad company, its expansion, allowed mass migration from across the empire to what was then the new Zionist enterprise that had arisen over the turn of the century, of the last century. Robert Kennedy, a man who was assassinated by a Palestinian, Sirhan, whilst a correspondent writing for the Chicago Tribune and Washington Post from that region, wrote many columns remarking on the concern being expressed by the Lebanese that there were entire villages in the Harun, entire villages had migrated. There was mass migration to the newly created cities of Tel Aviv, for instance, and that played itself out in many areas of the Levant. So when I look at this issue of who are the Palestinians and who are the Jews, and what are the various stakeholder interests in this, it's a conflict, right? That surely we can resolve it, and how to resolve it, we've got to strip away some of the BS, and a lot of it is BS. When you arrive at the problem, you're usually confronted by it'll be like an activist, polemicist perspective, where you get told, here's the cleavage point. You've got to support the two-state solution. It's got to be the borders of 67. It's got to be the Fatah position. You are a bad person. You're a Zionist if you believe anything else. Well, I'm not a Zionist as such. If I am a Zionist, I am a Zionist because Nelson Mandela was equally supportive of the idea that the Jews are entitled to their historic homeland. I can give you just here's a good reason why I'm not a Zionist, because most Zionists do not believe in the corpus separatum, which was proposed in 1947, in which Jerusalem itself was to become an independent enclave, the head separated from the body, as it were. I actually am a firm believer that the solution to the problem of religious observances, where you cannot have a situation where Islam is in control of another city with the equivalent stature like a Mecca, where the Christianity has Rome, and of course there was a loss of Constantinople, but in terms of major urban centers of religion, Jerusalem is important for many different faiths. And to say that it would be a better situation under Islam, the status quo in Mecca I find aberrant. It is only in Mecca that you find signage that is any analogous to how one would view apartheid. There are signs in Mecca that distinguish between Muslims and non-Muslims. There are roads that distinguish. You're allowed to drive on certain roads if you're a Muslim, or you're not a Muslim. You're forbidden entry to particular places. And in Saudi Arabia, there are prohibitions on the practice of religion, any other or public practice of any religion other than Islam. So if you're a Christian, you can observe your Christian faith behind closed doors. You won't be locked up. There's no religious police as in Iran, for instance, but there is still a degree of policing that occurs. So it's a very different status quo. Under the current status quo in Jerusalem, Muslims who are Israeli citizens are serving in the IDF. There are Muslim citizens of Israel who are freely able to practice their religion, and there are mosques. For people to paint this as a picture as if it were apartheid, for me, is a disgrace. It is a complete inversion and perversion of our historical narrative, and I can speak to this point in a distantly related case, and we can go into those facts and details about my situation as a Jew, as a secular Jew in South Africa. But let's talk about the issues to do with our faiths. I do not believe for a minute that a situation where there are different faiths is anyway a sense a segregation of identity. If it's quite the reverse. In Jerusalem, it is Muslims who are allowed into the certain areas of the Grand Mosque. Jews aren't allowed to go there, and of course there are these factions, zealots who wish for the return of the temple, who on certain holy days of the Jewish calendar wish to make their religious observances quite close to that mosque. But this idea that the Jews are undermining the temple is a libel that's been essentially to gaslight and to arouse emotions. There's no evidence to suggest. There's a lot of footage, for instance, prior to the incident which led up to the Operation Al-Aqsa, which had been planned in months ahead. So there's no in my mind, that the cause that of Al-Aqsa is just historically emotive, used to arouse emotions amongst people who are in Islam. But that particular incident where there were people barricading themselves in the holy mosque, where there was what I saw were police entering it's not Al-Aqsa as such, it's actually the Grand Mosque. Al-Aqsa is a separate small little mosque on the one side of the Temple Mount. There were some flashbang grenades, tear gas, what have you, in an attempt to remove people who had been firing fireworks inside the mosque. And that's what I saw. And I'm also a witness to the events which occurred on the 7th of October 2023. There was live streaming of that footage on social media. People were streaming using GoPros. I've personally witnessed as it unfolded. And I've subsequently discovered certain things. For instance, the cars that were out at the Nova Festival, trapped in a log jam, traffic jam that was set alight. I don't see any evidence to suggest that it was an inside job, that this is the result of the IDF going guns blazing into the Nova Festival. What I see quite often is old footage from the war in Iraq. There's some infrared camera footage being used to suggest that there were Apache helicopters taking out. There was some kind of civil war going on at the time on a religious holiday. So it's, for me, it's libelous. It's yet another blood libel to suggest, as many people do today, that Israel attacked Gaza on October 2023, on the 7th of October. For me, it's nuts. And do we need to go that far? So we've gone quite a bit off track here. We're trying to return to the status where the various people announcing recognition of a Palestinian state in the aftermath of a genocide report released by a UN body that has a controversial history, United Nations Human Rights Commission, where the previous chair was from Iran, where Navi Pillay has signed off on a document making the bold claim that Israel unleashed its campaign against Gaza on the 7th of October 2023, in an inversion of reality. We can pick this up. I'm going to leave it at that, and I, as usual, request that you subscribe. And anyone is free to engage me on an honest dialogue on what is going on in the Middle East that affects a lot of people in different ways. Thank you so much.